Well, joining me now is our friend, Democratic Congressman from Massachusetts, Jake Auchincloss. Welcome to you. First, on Secretary Rubio's meeting with Netanyahu today, where they both praised Donald Trump's bold vision, as they called it, in Gaza, despite Palestinian and Arab nations ruling out a U.S. takeover of Gaza and the resettlement of Palestinians. Is what was first viewed as some kind of a wild statement becoming legitimate? I mean, if the idea gets repeated enough, will it seem less outrageous?
Alex, nice to be with you again. For 50 years now, American policy in the Middle East has been marked by extremely careful rhetoric. Every communique about the two-state solution has had commas and semicolons double-checked. And yet, some pretty careless actions by both the United States and Israel. Obviously, the invasion of Iraq, a major blunder. Israel itself taking its eye off of Gaza and focusing on the West Bank in recent years. What we're seeing now with Donald Trump and Secretary Rubio is some very careless rhetoric, without question. This discussion about displacing Palestinians on a long-term basis or turning it into the Riviera. And yet, the actions that they are taking, if you ignore the careless rhetoric, is actually quite careful and quite strategic. What they are doing is they are making the plight of the Palestinian people Arab leaders' problem. Because Arab leaders, for the last 70 years, have said one thing about Palestinians and done nothing. And now, for the first time, you've got Egyptian and Jordanian and Saudi leaders who are actually rolling up their sleeves and saying to themselves, how are we going to fund and secure the redevelopment of Gaza? And so I will say, what we're seeing right now in these first 3 weeks of the Trump administration relative to Israel and Gaza actually has been progress.
Interesting. And I see how you're presenting that. So I'm going to think about that for a bit. You mentioned Saudi Arabia. We have a U.S. delegation set to go there for the talks on a Ukraine-Russia peace deal. But an aide close to President Zelensky tells NBC News that as of last night, Ukraine still didn't have an invitation. And European leaders are holding their emergency summit tomorrow over the concerns that they are also being blocked from this peace process. Is the Trump administration going into these negotiations in good faith?
They have never been in good faith regarding Ukraine for a decade now. Donald Trump infamously supplicated himself in front of Vladimir Putin in 2018 in Helsinki when he took Vladimir Putin's word over his own intelligence agencies. He refused to say in his debate against Kamala Harris that he even wanted Ukraine to win this war. So the Ukrainians have every right to be deeply suspicious of Donald Trump's motives. And it's a bad sign that, one, his own Secretary of Defense is negotiating against himself as opposed to against Russia in his first week in office. And number two, that they're going to Saudi Arabia to talk directly to Vladimir Putin, thereby platforming him without inviting the Ukrainians to these negotiations on their own future. There can be no negotiations with Russia that are not met simultaneously by continued support for Ukraine's war-making capability and also by inclusion of Ukraine in the process.
Let's talk about the mass government firings, because AP is reporting thousands of IRS workers may be laid off right now. It is tax season. Jobs are also on the chopping block at the Housing Department, also at U.S. health agencies. CBS obtained a termination letter to a Health and Human Services employee, which said, quote, unfortunately, the agency finds that you are not fit for continued employment because your ability, knowledge, and skills do not fit the agency's current needs, and your performance has not been adequate to justify further employment at the agency. I mean, what do you make of how this downsizing is being carried out?
The federal government is not Twitter, right? You can't move fast and break things. It's not actually going to save taxpayers money. For example, you'd mentioned the IRS, Alex. Every dollar put into the IRS in terms of its bandwidth and its capability earns the U.S. taxpayer somewhere between $5 and $10 back. Because what the IRS does is it goes and audits rich people who are trying to evade their taxes, and that makes the U.S. government money. You had mentioned also Health and Human Services. They're axing hundreds, if not thousands, of career scientists at the Food and Drug Administration. These are people who are evaluating using highly sophisticated biostatistics whether or not biologics or medical devices that our listeners right now put into their bodies when they're sick are safe. And by impairing the capability of that agency, one, we're undermining U.S. biomedical innovation globally, but two, we're endangering Americans' health and well-being. How is this chaos making people's lives better? How is this lowering costs? If Elon Musk wants to go fight waste, fraud, and abuse, absolutely, Democrats are here to work with him on that. Nobody's ever been against that initiative in the federal government. He should have started, though, in the Department of Defense, where they're spending millions of dollars a year on Alaskan king crab, and show them how to procure more efficiently and how to be a lean and nimble fighting force. We would have worked with him.
Yeah, I'm going to look at that Alaska king crab thing that you just mentioned. Good grief. Let me ask you about the NBC News report that government was trying to rehire several dozen nuclear safety workers who were fired on Thursday. So apparently the government's having trouble tracking them down. You're on the House Energy Committee. What does it tell you about the way these layoffs are organized? And could they actually put the country at risk?
They seem already to be. They're indiscriminate. Clearly copy and paste emails, and they are not going into these agencies and evaluating where there might be excess staffing, where we might be able to gain efficiencies, or in some instances actually looking to expand the capability of that agency. They're not doing it that way. This is just Elon Musk trying to come in and break things for the sake of breaking them. And again, that has real consequences when it's the federal government. If you want to go buy a software company and turn it into an avatar for your form of efficiency, that's your right. But don't come and do it with taxpayer dollars and put people at risk. What I still haven't seen, though, from this administration is any plans to lower costs for everyday Americans. I'm looking at home and auto insurance bills that are going to go up by double digits over the next year because of the tariffs and the deportations and undermining of the rule of law. And no amount of Doge is going to pay people's insurance bills. Yeah, point well taken. As always, Jake Auchincloss, I've enjoyed the conversation. You actually gave me some homework to do. I've got a couple points now I've got to do, so thanks. All right. We'll see you soon.